Nice.
Here we are again, Blake, in your basement.
1 year older.
1 year older? I guess so.
Why did we both sigh after that?
I don't know.
It's funny because this is like one of my favorite episodes of the entire year.
And we're both like, ugh. Because you reminded me of the specter of mortality
Yeah.
that dangles over us all like a pendulum.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, I'm really excited about this one. Welcome to VCR, Vintage Cinema Rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
And I'm Michael.
And this is our year-end roundup, our best of episode series. So this is the best of the new movies. And what that means is for us is we're doing our top 5 movies that we saw this year from the last 5 years, first or second viewing.
That's right. We are indeed doing that. So...
I hope you caught all of that.
Yeah. Okay. So normally we just do a top 5, and the rule is top 5 best movies we saw that year,
Yep.
first or second viewing, right? But this year we're doing 2 separate lists.
Yeah. So
One pre-2000 and one post-2020.
my pre-2000 list, I do have one that's a little newer than that. It's like 2001.
Okay,
so, sorry.
interesting. So, like any great relationship, Blake makes the rules, but he can also break them.
Yes. But yeah, no, I'm really excited about this because it's always fun getting to share your favorite movies, especially you and I getting to cross-reference, share our favorite movies of the year and talk about them.
Yeah, and I feel like independently, we have very different tastes.
Yes.
So we often go off in wildly different directions.
Yeah, there's sometimes some crossover. Jason and I generally tend to have a little bit more crossover. Unfortunately, he, because of personal matters, having a baby. Congrats, Jason.
That's a lie. We killed him. We killed him. We ate him. I'm currently wearing a skin suit right now.
Yeah, so in a way, Jason's here with us now, and he watched almost as many movies as us. But no, seriously, he's out busy, and he hasn't got to see a lot of movies because he's been busy parenting. So
Busy being drawn and quartered in
Yeah.
my basement.
yeah, so anyway.
Flayed alive.
So yeah, so we're starting with our new movies of the year first, and then next episode will be our old movies that we're going to talk about. Question to you, like, which list for you was the harder to put together?
The pre-2000s, so the second top 5 list we're doing, was a lot harder for me to put together.
I actually found the same this year.
Obviously, we watch a lot of movies, but like when it came to my pre-2000s, like it was most of the older movies I watched were just for this podcast.
Well, and some of the old movies that we picked, a lot of the old movies we picked this year are some of my favorites of all time. Like, for example, Tremors we did at the beginning of the year. One of my favorites of all time.
I remember.
But I've seen that movie multiple times, so I
Yeah.
can't include that on my list, right? So I found this year I was a little bit more limited on what I could pick just because I've seen a lot of old movies, and I've seen a lot of the old movies that you and I specifically chose this year. Now, that's not to say that, we found some movies that I hadn't seen this year for the podcast. Like, there are 2 movies that I consider to be like a 5-star masterpiece that are on my top 5 old movies list, but I kind of picked a little bit more on vibes than I did on like my top 5 new movie list.
Okay, that's interesting. On my pre-2000s list, there are a couple repeat offenders, like second viewings, I mean. No, I think my top 5 of post-2020 may surprise you a little.
I hope mine surprises you maybe a little bit, but I'm also notorious for talking about movies and talking about the movies that I love a lot.
Well, I'm notorious for tuning you out, so
So this is going to work out perfectly.
I may be surprised if I am indeed listening.
Good. Okay, well, I guess that being said, do you just want to get into it?
Yeah, I guess we should. I've been teasing actually number 5 on my post-2020 list for a while now.
Yeah.
Both on the podcast and to you personally with no microphones in our face.
Right.
So maybe we should just get right into it.
Yeah, I think so. And again, before we get started, just again, this is our 2020's favorite movies that we watched first or second viewing this year. So if I watched, for example, a movie from 2022 that I really loved, that might show up on my list this year because maybe I only got to that this year. Because, you and I see a lot of movies. We don't necessarily get to see every movie that we want to see in a year.
There's actually, and you know what? Sometimes there's a movie you've been meaning to watch for a while, but you just don't get around to it.
Yeah.
And then you finally get around to it and you're like, all right, that's going on the list.
Yeah, and I think the average moviegoer, like, that's what their experience is, right? Like, I think that a lot of movie lists that are out there are going to be people who are in the industry who get to see, like, every single new movie. I think that's maybe detrimental to their viewing experience in a way. Like, it's fun kind of getting to approach some of these in a little bit more of an organic kind of way, right? Like get to them when you want to get to them.
Yeah, absolutely, right?
Anyway, that being said, I'm really excited. Always very excited for this episode. So I think we're going to get started with your number 5.
My number 5 for post-2020 movies that I watched for the first or second time in 2024 is a little movie that went right to video on demand on May 8th of this year.
Huh.
And that movie was called... I'm really milking this for all it's worth. That little movie was called Red vs. Blue Restoration.
Really?
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
Okay, so for those of you at home or in your car or wherever, like
in your washroom,
you may have heard of a little web show called Red vs. Blue.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I've heard of it. You've shown me it before.
I have forced you to watch it at gunpoint multiple times. So
very, very popular show.
it's funny. Every now and then, like with my like friends or colleagues, I'll name drop Red vs. Blue, and people are like, "Oh yeah, like the funny Halo show, right?"
Right.
A lot of people, especially our age,
Yep.
you say Red vs. Blue, and they recognize it, right?
Yep.
What fewer people know is that Red vs. Blue ran for 19 seasons.
Wow.
What even fewer people than that know is that Red vs. Blue did start off as kind of a silly, funny Halo show, right?
Mhm.
Just a bunch of guys standing around in a canyon, shooting at each other, arguing, getting up to misadventures, right?
Mhm.
What even fewer people know is that the show, as it went along, acquired a startling amount of emotional depth.
Really?
Really. So I'm really hijacking this podcast right now. So you're just going to have to bear
No,
with
you got
me.
to sell me on this. I want to hear why this is your top 5.
Red vs. Blue ran for its first 5 seasons, what was later broken down into the Blood Gulch Chronicles.
Mhm.
It was kind of just this silly Halo show, right?
Right.
It was with these 2 teams stationed in the middle of a box canyon, the red team and the blue team, right?
Mhm.
And they were trapped in what was early on identified as the world's most pointless civil war, right? In the first episode, Simmons says, like, you know, the only reason they built a base over there is because we have a base over here.
Right.
And if we pulled out today, they would have 2 bases in the middle of an empty box canyon in the middle of nowhere. Whoop-de-fucking-do, right? The whole first 5 seasons, they just have a bunch of silly misadventures,
Mhm.
the red team and the blue team. Then around season 6, which was called Red vs. Blue Reconstruction, suddenly the show got a little more serious.
Okay.
Some of the sillier aspects were dropped and certain plot points were elaborated upon.
Mhm.
And then from there, the show continued to evolve. It continued to acquire more depth. Around season 8, Red vs. Blue Revelation, they actually brought in a new animator and started incorporating their own CGI fight scenes into the in-game footage.
Oh, nice.
It was pretty startling stuff, right?
Yep.
And the whole premise that they eventually arrived at is that it's kind of becomes this found family story, right?
Right.
They're a bunch of misfits who don't fit in anywhere else. They're a bunch of like dysfunctional idiots, but somehow they come together and become a family, right?
Like each separate team or the teams together?
The teams together.
Okay.
Even though they're ostensibly like at war with each other,
Yeah.
like they sort of become a family. It's almost kind of like when you leave them to their own devices, they'll fight with each other.
Uh-huh.
But when there's a common enemy, they will somehow band together and become like startlingly effective.
What a commentary on humanity.
Yeah, really. So basically, the show ran again for about 19 seasons, right? The seasons are kind of broken down into arcs, right? First 5 seasons, that's the Blood Gulch Chronicles.
Yep.
Seasons 6, 7, and 8, that's the Recollection Trilogy.
Mhm.
Season 9 and 10, that's the Project Freelancer Saga. Seasons 11, 12, and 13, that's the Chorus Trilogy. Basically, what's interesting about Red vs. Blue is that there's kind of like what's called exit points.
Mhm.
Like if you just watch the first 5 seasons,
Right.
like if you stop there, that's an okay ending to the whole series.
Yep.
Most people generally consider season 13 to be like the perfect ending, right?
Okay.
Like I don't want to get into it in case anyone decides to go watch it, and you should, but like season 13 ends in such a beautiful, poignant, genuinely affecting way.
Uh-huh.
That you're like, wow, like what do we do from here? And unfortunately, the creators kind of had to ask themselves that question at the end of 13, but they just trucked on for a few more seasons.
Okay.
Again, like I don't hate everything post-Chorus Trilogy, but like, you know, that's kind of when the ground gets a little bit shakier, right?
Sure.
The whole series is started by a guy named Bernie Burns, and him and a guy named Matt Hullum directed most of the first 10 seasons, right?
Okay.
Around season 11, they passed the show off to this guy named Miles Luna. He did the Course trilogy. I think he did a great job. I think the Course trilogy is like some of the best work they ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And then, unfortunately, like post season 13, the show kind of got kicked around a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It kind of got passed from creator to creator, and like not everything post 13 is terrible, but some of it is a little wonky and shaky, right?
Yeah.
This all culminated in 2020 with season 18, which was just called Red vs. Blue Zero, which a lot of people fucking hated.
Okay.
And then the show just kind of laid dormant for a few years. Again, this was in 2020. So then last year, in the summer of 2023, a trailer dropped for Red vs. Blue Restoration, and Bernie Burns and Matt Hullum, two of the original creators, were suddenly back.
Okay.
And they hadn't touched the show in over 10 years.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they'd always been involved as like executive producers, but suddenly it was like this amazing trailer drops, and it's like directed by Matt Hullum, and everyone was like, ah! So then that was in the summer of last year, and then it was announced that Rooster Teeth, the company that was responsible for this whole thing, was suddenly being shut down. Their corporate overlords decided that the company was losing money, so they were being basically gutted for parts, right?
Okay.
So then for a little bit, it was up in the air where it's like, well, what about season 19?
Yeah.
So then it was revealed that they were going to release season 19 as a standalone movie, and that it would come out on May 8th directly to video on demand.
Mm-hmm.
Think about this from my perspective. It's this beloved franchise with these beloved characters that's kind of just been passed around and kicked around and maybe cheapened a little bit over the last, 7-ish years or whatever, right?
Right.
So then finally, after all this, with the company burning around them, Red vs. Blue Restoration comes out. I bought it opening day. Blake, ask me how much I liked Red vs. Blue Restoration.
Enough to be on your top 5.
It's not very good.
Oh.
Yeah. I won't get into it because I'm drastically over time here, but it's not that great.
And it's on your top 5.
And it's on my top 5.
Okay.
Just for the sheer nostalgia factor.
Okay, fair enough.
There's a bunch of creative choices I really don't agree with.
Yep.
There's one or two moments that did genuinely make my jaw drop a little bit.
Yep.
It's a definitive ending to this scrappy little franchise. And you know what? Red vs. Blue always meant a lot to me. So even though I didn't like it all that much,
yeah,
I still had a great time.
Honestly, with a top 5 list, I think that there should be something personal about it, right? And so for you, like, that's kind of goes back to last year when I put Contact as my number 5. It wasn't one of the best movies I saw this year. Or last year. It was a really good movie that I liked a lot, but it inspired me to go back and like kind of go back to my old love of like sci-fi and like space epics and space films and that sort of thing, right? So I really appreciate that ended up as your number 5.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny. It's like I probably would have preferred if the series had just ended with season 13. I think a lot of people would have. And like, but I mean, it's kind of like, you know what? It's a proper conclusion. And you know what? The fact that they managed to like push it out the door again as the company was sinking like the Titanic, I was like, cool, we did it.
I love how you explain that all too, because I was like, oh my god, if this is where this is all going, like this is going to be another 10 minutes of you talking about this movie.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, it was really just a love story to a TV show through a movie and your experience with that movie.
Pretty much, yeah. And you know what? I should also say, like, Bernie Burns has been open about the fact that the movie basically had no budget. They had like no money to put behind this.
Right.
And like you can kind of tell like, well, it's just certain characters just aren't there. Again, there's certain creative choices I don't agree with, but like for what it's worth, it's an ending. And that's all I'll say. Red vs. Blue, Restoration, it's an ending.
Fair enough. Do you know where it's streaming?
I checked. I think you still have to rent it or buy it off Amazon Prime.
Fair enough. Okay, well, I have very little relationship to Red versus Blue, as you know, so I probably will not be going to check that one out, but I'm glad that it's on your list.
Me too. And you know what? For as much as I say I didn't like it, I watched it 2 or 3 times this year.
Fair enough.
Hey.
Yeah. No, that's always a sign of it at least kind of sparked something in you, right?
Yeah, really.
So my top 5, my number 5 on my top 5, this is a movie that I have been talking about for probably the past 6 months after watching it for the first time. I watched it a second time because I forced Jess to watch it with me. I haven't shut up about it in the last 6 months.
Can I guess?
Yes.
Is it Civil War?
No.
Is it the Beaver movie?
It's the Beaver movie.
Hey!
This is a movie that I've been trying to tell you to watch for a long time. It's called Hundreds of Beavers.
Maybe we'll watch it later, but yeah.
I watched it. So this is my number 5 movie, Hundreds of Beavers. It's a movie that came out a couple years ago to, I think, a little bit of fanfare at one of the movie festivals down the States, and then it got an actual release this year. It's on Tubi right now and also on Prime, so you do have a lot of options right now. This is one of the funniest movies that I've seen in years. Like, legitimately a really, really good time. It's essentially, the premise of it is a alcoholic brewer in the 1800s living in Michigan is out in the wilderness when a bunch of beavers essentially destroy his brewery setup, and he has to learn how to survive out in the wilderness.
Oh, no.
As a trapper. And that sounds like maybe a little bit of a boring movie, like maybe a drama. And let me tell you, it's nothing like that, because the animals he's trying to trap are animals that are people in full suited animal costumes.
Oh, my word.
So if you can just picture like a mascot, like a beaver mascot, essentially walking around with like a big beaver head on, that's exactly what this movie is. The hook about this movie is that they're essentially like anthropomorphic animals. And it's kind of like part Looney Tunes, like part video game adaptation.
Like Charlie Chaplin almost?
Yeah.
Isn't it like a silent movie?
Yes, it's borderline a silent movie. There is a little bit of speaking in it, but it's kept to a very minimum. And it's like very slapstick comedy, physical humor, like you said, like the Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, like old school. Like it's even in black and white. This is a movie that, for all intents and purposes, should not work because of the year that's released in.
Yeah.
And yet it is a masterpiece.
Okay.
I will say, this is the reason why this movie is not higher on my list, is the first 20 minutes of this movie are a little slow.
Okay.
And you've got to give it the time to like fully let it brew, fully let it cook, if you will, because it kind of takes its time world building and kind of like getting you to understand, get your brain to like accept the fact that these animals are humans, that how this comedy works, like the Looney Tunes aspect of this film.
Right.
But once the ball starts rolling, like the gags, each gag kind of just, it's like a snowball. It just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling, and suddenly like it's a 2-ton like chunk of snow that's coming your way kind of thing.
Oh my word.
And so I showed Jess this, and I was like, the first act of the movie, I was like, humor me, because this movie gets incredible. And the other thing that I think that is maybe less noted about this movie when people are talking about it is this movie has a lot of goddamn heart. Like a lot of goddamn heart. Like at its core, this is a kind of romance film. Like this guy is trying to woo the fur trader's daughter, essentially the merchant's daughter.
Oh my.
And so that's kind of the whole, like, why the ball gets kind of rolling as well, the other side plot to this. Just, again, let it simmer. If you get to the point where you meet Santa, the fur trader, and you're not having a good time about 10 minutes after that, this movie might not be for you. But if you are having a good time once Santa, the fur trader, shows up, oh my God, does it get crazy. Like,
okay, so you gotta get past
good.
Santa the fur trader.
Yes, once he's been introduced, the movie really starts to cook. This movie is wild. I really gotta say, like, this is one of, but not the only movie on my list where the title card shows up like a third or 2/3 of the way through the movie. And it's phenomenal.
Okay, you may have sold me on it. That sounds pretty interesting.
Oh my God. Like I said, the way that this builds up, like, I'm actually really excited to go back and check out the other movie by these creators. Like, this is a micro budget movie, and the success that this movie has is just wild. Like, I'm really excited. Their old movie is called Lake Michigan Monster, and it's another black and white kind of silent
So this
comedy.
is kind of their thing. They've found
This has
their
become
niche.
their thing, yeah. And I'm really excited that in 2024 we're kind of circling back and, like, you know, digging up some of the old, like, ways of doing things and putting a new spin on them. And like I said, if you like video games, there's like a low key. People aren't talking about this as much if they don't understand video games, but there's a video game like aspect to this movie that it somehow becomes better than like 90% of movies that are directly based on video games.
Okay, you may have done it, Blake. You may have after 6 months, you may have finally sold me on this Beaver movie.
I really, really hope that people go and check this one out because it's so worth your time. It's so original. It's so fun and exciting. And if you're nostalgic like me for like the Looney Tunes as a child, like anything like that, you're gonna have a good time with this one.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
So, like I said, you can check this one out on Tubi or Prime. Like, this is widely available right now, so I can't recommend it enough. And beavers, a lot of them.
A lot of them. Hundreds. Even.
Hundreds. Literal hundreds of beavers.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's great. I cannot recommend it enough. So, anyway, what's your number 4?
My number 4 is a movie that came out in 2022. I heard rumblings that it was better than it had any right to be.
Mm-hmm.
I've watched a couple clips over the last 2 years and been like, that's really good. I should check this out. I finally checked it out a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
That is Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
No way.
Yeah, really.
That movie came out in 2022?
I think like December 2022.
I see.
Anyways, yeah, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Apparently, it's good. Like, I don't know what to say. It's really good. It's almost as good as Shrek 2.
Wow.
Yeah, and I love Shrek 2, right? Basically, the premise is pretty simple. Our boy, Puss in Boots, he's a cat, so he's got 9 lives, but he's down to his last one.
Oh, man.
Yeah, right? So years of heroing and showboating and grandstanding have whittled him away. So he hears about a wishing star somewhere in this enchanted forest, the Dark Forest, I think it's called, and if he gets it, he can make a wish and wish for more lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Along the way, there's, John Mulaney stars as a villain named Big Jack Horner, and then there's Goldilocks and the Three Bears crime family, and and then there's an old flame of his, played by Salma Hayek, that shows up.
Nice.
So,
nice.
Yeah, it becomes kind of like a chase film almost, where they're all chasing down this star, and how do I describe this movie? Essentially, this is a children's movie about mortality.
Huh.
It's literally a children's movie about death.
Right.
And accepting your own mortality. Like a lot of the great myths that humans have created, it's about essentially the search for immortality.
Yeah.
Or the fear of death.
I think that's really interesting in the sense that, Shrek 2 is similar in that vein where it's like, it's a kid's movie that has a very adult ideas, and I think it actually hits better as an adult than a kid.
Right, yeah, because Shrek 2 is almost about, like, the difficulties of, like, being in a relationship.
Yeah.
Not, like, do you change for your partner or do you stay the same? Like,
right.
What do you do? How do you navigate your dumb in-laws?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah, like, the movie's really funny and zany and silly, but there's also some, like, genuinely... How do I put this delicately? This movie, I think, for me, is really sold on the strength of its villain. And
I love that.
Yeah, he's barely in the movie, but a certain bounty hunter is chasing Puss in Boots down.
Okay.
The movie starts with Puss in Boots just totally cleaning house, like running circles around everybody. And then about 15, 20 minutes in, he meets this bounty hunter who just completely mops the floor with him. And keep in mind, he's on his last life, right?
Right.
So suddenly the stakes are really, really high. Puss in Boots basically spends the whole movie running from this guy. Whenever he shows up with like a whistle. I'm going to try and do it right now.
Don't do it.
I'm going to do it. Like this kind of eerie whistle that like heralds his arrival.
Okay.
Anyways, so I remember hearing that Puss in Boots 2 was shockingly good, and I was like, shut up. And then I watched the movie, and I was like, all right, it's good. It's as good as everyone says it is.
Wow.
Yeah, I have no notes. No, wait, I have one note. This is going to sound weird because I love John Mulaney.
Yep.
I think he's slightly miscast as his character.
Okay.
Big Jack Horner.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was just... Maybe it's just because I've listened to so much John Mulaney over the years. It was just kind of distracting.
Oh, I see.
But yeah.
Yeah, he's a good voice actor. Like I love him as the pig in Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, and like he's great in that, but like I didn't think he was great in this one.
Fair enough.
Maybe it's just that he's playing a villain.
Yep.
Sorry, John. Not completely standing you.
And where can you find it?
It's on Crave, and it's also on Prime.
Cool. So my number 4. When I think of Best Picture at the Academy Awards, at the Oscars, I think of a movie that has it all, essentially, right? Like, it has probably the best direction. It does something new, like, visually that I've never seen before. The score just, like, hits incredibly hard. Maybe the story is timeless, that sort of thing. I think my number 4 is the Best Picture of 2024 and should win the Oscar.
Okay.
What that movie is the sequel to 2022's Dune. It's Doom Part 2.
Ah, okay.
So Doom Part 2 is the second half of Frank Herbert's masterfully written sci-fi novel.
Right.
Generally speaking, like, it's widely regarded that the second half of the book is where all the action happens. It's the better part of the book.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's hard not to argue that, right? Like, that's where all of the, like, interesting, contemplative, like, more philosophical nature of the book is. And so that's really what the second movie is about, plus all of the crazy action that happens in the
Yeah,
second movie.
that's when the war takes place.
Right, exactly. And again, why this movie is, in my opinion, the best picture of 2024 is because Denis Villeneuve has done something like, there are so many scenes in this movie that I have never seen done the way that they've been done before. Whether it's like action moving slowly, it's poetic, like how some of the warriors move in this movie.
Okay.
There's the scene where Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet, rides the sandworm for the first time. That is one of the, like, jaw on the floor, like, crazy moments of a movie that I've seen this year.
Okay, interesting.
Masterful film. It makes part one actually worse watching them together. Like,
Okay.
I had the opportunity this year. I was on a plane and both of them were on the plane, so I watched part one and part two at the same time. I'd already seen both of them before.
Right, like you watched them back to back.
I watched them back to back, so it's like 6 hours of movie almost.
Okay.
The first movie is really stiff, and I found that the second movie loosened up. All of the characters had a lot more breathing room, and some of the performances in this movie are, like, absolutely iconic. So, for example, Javier Bardem playing Stilgar
Right.
is genuinely one of the most wholesome characters, one of the funniest warrior characters I've seen on a screen in a long time.
Okay.
He is so good in this movie. Like, he is such a good actor, and people, like, you almost don't even remember that he was the bad guy in No Country for Old Men because of how great this performance is as well.
Okay, so he just, like, he fully embraces the character. Like, he loses himself in it.
I think that he deserves the Best Supporting Actor award for this film. Like,
Okay,
it
interesting.
is next level good. He is such a good actor that I will, for the rest of my life, go and see any movie he does.
Okay, so he steals the show for you.
I think he steals the show for me. But that's not to say that all the other performances aren't great. And this is the other kind of selling feature to this movie, if you are a fan of the books, because I know that there's a little bit of discourse out there about, you know, different approaches like adapting and what you add, what you take away. But what I really commend Denis Villeneuve for, and he's a massive fan of these book series, and, like, you know, this was a passion
clearly.
project for him, right? I think what he did with this was really, really smart in that he took elements of the second book and wound them into this. And what I mean by that is, I haven't actually read past the first book.
No, I tried reading the second one a while ago and I couldn't get into it.
But what the books actually do is, Paul Atreides was never intended to be a messiah character, right? Like,
Well, he's almost like a deconstruction of, like, the white savior archetype, right?
Exactly. And so he was actually a little distraught after the first book came out, and Paul Atreides was, you know, worshipped essentially. Like, this character written in this novel was worshipped for the performance in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so the second book is kind of a reaction to that. And it's like, no, this is the character that I was intending. And he kind of villainizes Paul in a much, you know, deeper way than the first book.
Well, he's not a hero. He's like a tyrant, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think what this movie does really effectively is it kind of weaves both of those ideas together. It shows, like, the reluctant character here stepping into this path, like, that he can actually see because of the way that the spice and everything works. Like, I mean, you probably have a general idea if you've never seen these books that, like, the spice is kind of, you know, the thing that's important in this world.
It's like cocaine that lets you see the future.
Exactly.
So it's cocaine.
Yeah. So he becomes like this reluctant character where he doesn't want to lean into that. But once he embraces it, the gloves are off, and you see, like, how scary this is going to be and how the implications of this and
Like a genocide on like a galactic scale.
yeah, and it's also just like it's a timeless story because it's all of this is about, religion and government and policy and like, should these intertwine? Like, should policy be dictated by religion? Like, how does that impact people? And like all of these ideas, and there's such big ideas, and I think that this kind of course corrects in the way that Frank Herbert was trying to course correct as well, because the other thing about this is Chani, played by Zendaya, is a much more well-rounded written character in the second part too. And she has a lot more agency, and I think that her character arc is probably one of the best character arcs in the movie.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Because like she's barely in the first movie.
Yeah, she is, and I think that was like people were kind of upset about that, but I genuinely think that her character and her performance is fantastic in this, and she's going to get brought up on a lot of other lists because of her performance in Challengers this year, which I also really liked. I didn't like. It's not on my top 5 list, but it's definitely on my long list of movies that I like this year. But yeah, man, this movie just absolutely rocks. Like, the score from Hans Zimmer just rips. Like, it's got the best cinematic moments of 2024, like, bar none.
Okay, interesting. I didn't see it because I wasn't a big fan of the first movie.
Yeah.
But I keep hearing that the second one is really, really good.
Yeah. Like I said, I liked part 1, but watching part 1 and part 2 together, it was like, ooh, like, I see a lot more of the faults of part 1, and wow is like part 2 such an improvement in every single way compared to part 1.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe I'll have to go watch it then.
Mm-hmm.
Probably won't ever watch part 1 again, but yeah.
And it's available on Crave too, so it is out there in the world.
Okay.
Right now.
Shit. Well, maybe I will watch it over the break. So, my number 3 is a small budget movie not a lot of people have heard of.
Really? I'm excited about this.
It's a little movie by a little studio that could, called Deadpool and Wolverine.
I hate you.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like such a shill putting a Marvel movie on my top 5. I had a great time with this movie. I saw it in theaters twice.
Wow.
Really? Like, you know what? I'm not even I was a huge X-Men fan in my time.
Yep.
I loved Logan. I loved a lot of those other movies. Oh shit! You want to know how old I am, Blake? I can remember like renting the first 3 X-Men movies on VHS.
Wow!
From like my local video store. Yeah. Quentin Tarantino wasn't working there, anyways. So, and then you know what? I saw the first 2 Deadpool movies, a few years ago, and like I thought they were okay.
Yeah.
Like I've never been super infatuated with the character. Mm-hmm. Like I thought they were fine, right?
Yep.
So I went into this movie just kind of. I was just like, it was a Sunday afternoon before work. I was like, whatever. Like, I'll go see Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yep.
I had a really, really good time. I understand you and your wife watched it recently, and you had less good of a time.
Yeah.
There are plenty of criticisms to level at this movie, and they're mostly fair criticisms, right?
Yeah.
That it's a lot of fan service. That, like, it's kind of a fanboy movie made for
13-year-old boys.
The fanboys, right? But you know what?
I have only negative things to say about Deadpool.
Okay, that's fair. But you know what? I had a super good time, and like, it's so great seeing Hugh Jackman back, especially in the like iconic yellow suit. And
right.
It's sort of a movie that's sold on its sequences more than like the sum of its parts.
Yep.
Like. The opening credits set to Bye 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 when he's like ripping apart Logan's skeleton and using it as, a weapon. Which, by the way, I'm sure some people probably thought that was like disrespectful to Logan. I was like, hey, fuck it. Like, if we're digging Hugh Jackman out of the grave, we may as well lean into it, right?
Right.
The sequence where he's traveling through the multiverse, like looking for a new anchor being.
Right.
Set to that Huey Lewis song or something.
Yep.
The final fight where they take down the Deadpool cores in like that one like single tracking shot. Mm-hmm. Something, by the way, something about the climax when they join hands and like stop Cassandra Nova, whatever. No, I think is it Cassandra Nova or Cassandra Cain?
Cassandra Nova.
Is it? Yeah. All right. That scene where they like stop the Time Ripper. I got shockingly emotional during that scene.
Wow.
You know what? I actually rewatched the first Deadpool recently.
Yep.
It's so weird how, like, these movies have to walk this line where, like, Deadpool's whole shtick is that he breaks the fourth wall, right?
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds looks into the camera and, like, winks at you, right? Yep. that's good for comedy, but it's not good for like emotional investment. Yet somehow, again, watching the first movie and then watching this one, Deadpool and Wolverine, they're able to somehow still occasionally sneak in these like emotionally affecting moments.
Mm-hmm.
Like rewatching the first Deadpool, like there's that sequence where like he tries to break out of the lab and he gets stabbed through the chest with like a steel pipe or whatever. And I was like, this is shockingly dramatic for like Ryan Reynolds playing
Right.
Ryan Reynolds. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yep.
So I don't know what it is. Something about that final sequence where they like the Madonna song blares. Like I've rewatched that so many times on YouTube. Something about it just appeals to me.
Nice.
So you know what? I had a great time with Deadpool and Wolverine.
That's great. I will leave my hot takes for Letterboxd. As a side note, we do have a Letterboxd account.
Wait, not to cut you off, but I'm
Yep.
cutting you off. I actually watched it in theaters twice, like I said.
Yep.
I felt it actually held up better the second time.
Do you think that it's a theater movie over a watch-at-home movie?
This might be something you just have to watch on the big screen with like an audience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I could see that as well. Like, I think this is a you got to buy in with everyone kind of movie because if you think about it at all, it kind of all falls apart in a sense.
Again, though, that's why I think a second viewing helps because, like, on a rewatch, you're kind of like, oh, okay. Like, I feel like it holds together a little bit better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll say a couple positive things about Deadpool and Wolverine. I think that Emma Corrin as Cassandra Nova, she goes for it so hard.
Fuck yeah, she does.
And she's great. I actually thought her performance was really good. And I think that's the only positive thing I have to say about this movie.
I think Hugh Jackman genuinely deserves an Oscar for that movie. He fucking sells it as Wolverine.
Yeah, but he already did that in Logan. And I love that movie. That was part of my draft picks when we did the 2020
I will
movie
say
draft.
one of the criticisms I've heard leveled against this movie is that it's basically just his character arc it's like the same character arc from Logan, just again.
Kind of.
Kind of, but I don't think that's a fair criticism.
I'm not going to say too much because this is your top 5. It's not my top 5, obviously. This is actually one of my most disappointing movies of the year, I think.
This might have been an instance where like maybe I overhyped it to you, or like everyone overhyped it to
It
you.
might have been that. I like Deadpool. Like, I would say 7 out of 10 first movie, 8 out of 10 Deadpool Part 2. I like Deadpool Part 2 a lot. This movie is like a 4 out of 10 for me.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I was not having a good time. I laughed a few times. I'll say I laughed, I grunted. I was like, okay, those
You
are funny
grunted?
moments.
Yeah.
I grunted. But like, I was surprised at how much I rubbed against this movie.
And you know what? That's fair. Sometimes you just rub against things, you know?
Yeah, again, you should look at my Letterboxd review of this one and follow us on Letterboxd because we post a lot on there. I'm trying to post as much as possible on there, so I have some takes on that movie, and that's all I'm going to say
And
right
we'll
now.
leave it at that.
Yeah, and that's on Disney Plus, right?
Is it on Disney Plus already? Okay, then yeah, that's where it would be. I mean, till you're 90.
Yeah, poor
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman. Although he's obviously having a good time.
Clearly, yeah.
Yeah. I will also say that was the other positive thing I'll say is like him wearing the iconic yellow suit was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't have a whole lot of great things to say about it. I think that is.
You're not really a superhero guy, though. I don't think
I'm
you've
not.
ever really been a superhero guy.
I'm not. Like, I like Batman, and that's kind of as far as it goes. Like, I do like some movies better than others, like Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one I loved. Like, certain movies will always kind of hold up in that regard. But I've never been a big superhero guy. I enjoy the Deadpool movies, but I have a lot of complaints about this one. And again, I don't want to get into too much detail here because that's not really what we're talking about here.
Okay, fair enough.
So my number 3 is a movie that I saw the trailer of this movie and I was like, I'm already in, sign me the fuck up. It is one of my favorite trailers of the last like probably 5 years. It's a movie that I dragged you out to go see with me.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a movie that I think is one of the most discussed films of 2024. Like, it's still in the top
Did you
Letterboxd
say
movies.
disgust or disgust? Because both are correct.
Both are correct because I'm talking about the substance.
Yep, okay, that's fair.
I think that this movie deserves some Oscars. I don't think it deserves Best Picture over Doom Part 2. I think Doom Part 2 is overall a better movie. I think the substance, though, is a goddamn masterpiece work of art.
Okay.
This is one of the best directed films that I've seen in a while. Like,
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I particularly like the opening shot where it's like, what's her name? Like Elizabeth Sparkle.
Yeah.
Yeah, we open to like her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and then you just see like the passage of years, how people walk over it. Some asshole spills a burger on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what's so great. Part of what is so great about this movie is the two opening shots of this movie explain the entire movie. Like, this is a movie at its core. I think this is maybe the best example of show, don't tell.
I would agree, yeah.
Because the opening two scenes of this movie, the first one is the Ag clone split scene, and then it goes into the star scene, and it effectively explains how the split is going to work, and then explains why we care about this person, and, and what this movie is about, you know, the passage of time. And like a big focus of this movie is, and it was marketed as that, is like, this is a takedown of beauty standards and of like how Hollywood, the beauty industry,
how badly it treats women over 30. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think that that's a very large part of it. However, what makes this movie so great is you can take that, but I think that there's just like, and part of the reason why this movie is just so talked about this year is I think that no matter who you are, in what industry you are, and like where you are in your walk of life, you're going to take away something from this.
Yeah.
And so a big point in this movie is about balance and respecting the balance.
Respect the balance. Remember you are one.
Remember you are one. The taglines from this movie are just incredible. Like, there are so many good quotes from this movie.
I will say that, like, out of all the movies, so The Substance did not make it onto my top 5.
Yep.
It is probably one of the smartest movies I've seen all year.
Yeah.
If not the smartest.
Exactly. It's a movie that you're going to think about for a long time. And for me, my big takeaway from this is it's a movie literally about balance. Like, this movie is so bitterly angry and aggressive, and it's not a subtle movie at all. It's about, like, it has a core message, and it is going to murder you with that message.
Beat you over the head with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is leaned so hard into that, and I respect that so much. And so for me, like, this movie kept going on about balance and respecting the balance. You are one. And my big takeaway from that is, like, at the end of the day, even though you can't reach across time and speak to your older self, you and you in the future and you in the past are one.
You're all, yeah, that's very smart. That's very smart.
Your life is, you have one life, and you can take from any point in your life and ahead of time. So if right now, if you want to go out and go on a 3-day bender and smoke a whole lot and do party and stay up all night long, you can take and take and take. But that's going to cost you.
Yep.
There is a cost, and it is so hard. That's the human experience. It is so hard to visualize that cost to us, right? And this movie just makes it so unavoidable, that cost.
I think there's also one of the things I kind of took away from the movie personally is it's almost kind of like a message about, like, gratitude almost.
Yeah.
Because what's her face? Elizabeth Sparkle, Demi Moore, her quest to reclaim her lost youth destroys her life.
Yes.
To a point where it's like, I think I even said to you afterwards, I'm like, if she just sat down and had some tea, she probably would be okay. But she had to go and upset things.
There are off-ramp opportunities in multiples in this movie. Like, this movie is like, it goes out of its way to show you, here's the out, here's the out, here's the out. And in, like, one final, heading into the third act, heading into, like, one of my favorite title cards of a movie that I've seen this year that made me laugh out loud, like, as hard as the Hundreds of Beavers title card made me laugh out loud.
Yeah?
There's a final moment where it's like, this is the out. And I said to Jess at that moment, I was like, if you stop the movie right now, this becomes a happy story. This is not a happy story.
Wait, so you did get Jess to watch it with you?
I did get Jess to
watch it.
What
What did Jess think?
She thought it was great.
Really?
She was
okay.
Like, she refused, like, fought against me to watch this movie. I watched this movie again last night because I couldn't decide where it was going to be on my top 5.
Okay, great.
I really love this movie.
You know, it's funny. I do remember, you know, you and I left the theater together, and I was kind of like, I kind of wish there was a woman with us.
Right.
Because I want to know what they think about this.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, like, there's a little bit of beauty standards for men, but I mean, like, you and I are dudes in our 30s, and no one gives a shit.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. So, no, she was like, that was gross, but I could take it. And also, she was like, it's a movie that I can't stop thinking about.
Yeah.
Even like she said that today, like I have not stopped thinking about this movie since we watched it. I know that there's people who are going to rub against the final act of this film. What I'll say is I kind of subscribe to the idea, and this isn't my original idea, that really the final, without completely spoiling things, the final act to me is more of a final vision of the main character. And the movie does a really good job of hinting towards that, because there's a lot of dreamlike sequences, there's a lot of crazy visions and dreams and nightmares that happen.
A lot of crazy shit, yeah.
And so I read that as like that was how the movie ended. Like, I didn't take a lot of the ending literally, but at the same time, the imagery of it, the batting of the head, the turn of the camera towards the audience to say, at the end of the day, I've shown you everything. I told you as blatantly as I possibly could what this movie is about. And at the end of the day, the blood is on your hands. What are you going to choose?
Yep. I didn't enjoy the movie as much as you did, mostly because I thought the ending was a bit too indulgent.
Mm-hmm.
It got to a point where it was like, okay, I get it. Like, stop hitting me.
Right. But that's the point. And that's why I love it so much.
Okay. And I can concede that's the point, but I also personally rubbed against it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I kind of knew that you didn't like the ending as much as I did. But for me, into the top 5, like where this ends up sitting, this is the last movie that actually came out in 2024 that's on my top 5 list. This is my top movie of 2024.
Okay.
I really hope that this movie gets some recognition at the Oscars.
I think it will. And like, props to Demi Moore. She fucking sells it in this movie.
Yeah, she does. She's incredible. Like, every one of the 3 main characters of this movie just have such great screen presence in this movie. Like, Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley is fantastic as the younger Sue, and Dennis Quaid playing Harvey is like one of
Oh my god, yeah, he's fantastic.
So good. He's my other like front runner for best supporting actor, because he is just such a grimy mofo in this movie. Like, his literal character name is Harvey, you know? Like,
oh, not even you're right. There's no subtlety.
There's no subtlety,
movie.
but that's the point of the movie. Is like, you get it, you understand. We all understand. Like, we all can see this. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, really.
I really genuinely love this movie. I could talk about this movie for hours, and I'm going to stop here. I think that maybe 5 years in the future, maybe we'll revisit this one and do like a podcast episode about it.
Yeah, that'd be all right.
Yeah, I really want to see how this one holds up, because I think that this movie is like, all of the top 5 movies that I'll say right now that from 2024 are going to be in my top 100 list. And this one's starting to cross the threshold of getting up there in my top 100 list. I really, really like this movie a lot.
Okay.
I think this is a genuine masterpiece. I think this deserves like the recognition for best director, best screenplay, cinematography, performances. I think it's all there.
I do remember like leaving the theater with you, and like we exchanged glances with like the manager, and I just said that was upsetting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really great movie.
Good. I liked it quite a lot, and I admired it quite a lot. I found the ending a little excessive.
It's not going to be a movie for everyone, but at the same time, I think that everyone should watch this movie, and you're going to watch it through a lot of like shoulders and elbows and fingers, like I did on my second viewing. Still didn't get through all of the gore and body horror elements, because this movie it's a body horror movie, but it's also very funny.
It is really good, right? Yeah. It's gross and funny at the same time.
Yeah. So that's my number 3, The Substance. In my opinion, my favorite movie of 2024. The next 2 movies, like I said, technically did not come out in 2024. So
okay,
we're getting into it. Top 2 now.
Number 2 is a movie that is currently still in theaters. It's a movie I saw last night, knowing we were recording today.
Wow.
And that movie is Sonic 3.
No way.
Yeah, way. So, for those of you not in the know, what a saga we've been on, right? So you guys remember 5 years ago when the initial trailer for Sonic dropped, and there was the nightmare-inducing body horror creature that they were trying to like
Lovecraftian horror.
Yeah, like the bloated corpse that they were like that they were trying to like Weekend at Bernie's us with. And then, you know, it became the laughingstock of the internet, so they withdrew. They spent $10 million redesigning Sonic. Mm-hmm. The movie came out a year later. I saw it in theaters by myself right before the pandemic.
Wow.
Literally like 2 weeks before the pandemic. And I'm happy to report that it was fine.
I liked the first one.
It was like a solid 7 out of 10. And it's just, so I first became a Sonic fan when I was 11 years old. I remember playing Sonic Adventure 2 on a friend's GameCube,
Yep.
going out and buying it. Holy fuck. Do you remember the hours and hours and hours you and I spent playing Sonic Adventure 2?
Oh, Chow Garden.
Oh, Chow Garden. And then, like, there was Sonic Adventure 2. Then there was Sonic Heroes, Shadow the Hedgehog, blah,
Yep.
blah, blah, blah. And then again, if you're a Sonic fan at all, you know that the series has had quite an adventure, right?
Yes.
You know, when I talk about Red versus Blue as this franchise that was kind of kicked around a little bit,
Yep.
that's not even close to how, like, stomped into the ground Sonic has been, right? Like, I mean, it's iconic, right? Sonic 06, considered one of the worst video games of all time. Sonic Boom, considered one of the worst video games of all time. Like, just, I think even the original creator has acknowledged that, like, Sonic has been mismanaged over the years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then after all these years, Sonic, the first Sonic movie from 2020, pretty good. Second one, Sonic 2 that came out in 2022, also pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Now Sonic 3, which is based on Sonic Adventure 2, the game that first got me into this franchise in the first place.
Right.
It's good. It's solid. It's actually really good.
You know, funny enough, I actually saw some reviews of this come out, I think yesterday, like literally yesterday.
Yeah, I think it literally came out, like, I think I might have seen it opening night.
Yeah, you might have, I think. And so I was looking at the reviews and I was like, oh man, I know Michael's going to really be attached to this one. I know he's going to like this. And I was like, he's going to just miss it before we do our top 5 of the year.
Well, fuck you. So the other thing too is, like, I have been a big Sonic fan all these years, and my favorite character has always been Shadow the Hedgehog.
Right.
And when I talk about the Sonic franchise being mismanaged, I think nowhere is that better exemplified than the character of Shadow.
Mm-hmm.
So he shows up in Sonic Adventure 2, immediately becomes a fan favorite, and then,
right.
you know, like, he kind of just became a walking meme, right? Like, where's that damn fourth Chaos Emerald, right? You know, those memes that were going around, like, ow, the edge. Like, even Ian Flynn is one of the writers on the comic series, and he even talks about how, like, he sometimes would avoid writing Shadow because Sega has these very strict mandates about what they want to do with him. So you know what? After all these fucking years, after all the memes, they finally got Shadow right.
Right.
Like, he is in top form in this movie. And by the way, do you remember during our Dracula episode when I was kind of talking shit about Keanu Reeves?
Yeah.
About how, like, we all love him, but he's not that great of an actor. He fully embodies the character.
He plays Shadow?
He plays Shadow.
That's
Did
awesome.
you not know that?
No, I had no idea.
Keanu Reeves. They
Oh my
got
God.
Keanu Reeves for Shadow, and he fucking crushes it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like, I even watched a behind-the-scenes featurette earlier today where he talks about how, like, he, like, really did his research and, like, really struggled to find, like, the perfect pitch for the character that would, like, be in sync with the other characters. And,
Right.
like, you know what? I watched this movie in theaters, had a great fucking time.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. Like, I'm glad that you got to experience this one too, because I've heard really good things about it. I'm really excited about it too.
It's like, you know what? It's so funny how, like, you know, if I could go back in time to 11-year-old Michael and say, like, you know, in what, 20 years, they're going to make a solid movie about this. You just have to be patient.
Yep.
This
How's Jim
movie-
Carrey in it?
Okay, here's the thing. I actually think he's a little obnoxious as Dr. Robotnik,
Yeah.
but I think that's a minority opinion.
Okay.
A lot of the reviews I've read over the years seem to really, really like him.
Yeah.
I've even heard some people say that he's kind of carrying these movies.
Yeah.
I think he's a little obnoxious, but, like, you know what?
If that puts people in seats, then fair enough.
Then fair enough. And you know what? He actually plays 2 characters in this movie.
Interesting.
And you know what? The guy's an amazing actor.
Yeah.
There's something to be said when, like, this man in his 60s is somehow more cartoonish than the CGI characters running around on screen. That is something of an accomplishment.
The way that man moves is
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, Sonic 3, really good. You know, it's funny. At the end of Sonic 2, they teased Shadow, and I thought to myself, wow, in 2 years, I'm really going to look forward to this. Here we are 2 years later.
That's great.
Yeah. I want to say, looking at my list, so we've got Red versus Blue Restoration, Deadpool and Wolverine, and now Sonic 3.
Yep.
I'm starting to realize that, like, I really am kind of a slut for fan service.
Yeah, you picked some, like, big IPs this year. Eh?
Yeah, and you know what? If that makes me a shill or, like, a simp for these big corporations, whatever, I can only speak to the great experiences that I had.
Funny enough, I have two IPs on my list. The first one being Dune, which
Dune.
is kind of a new IP. Like the books have kind of been out there and doing their thing
Yeah,
for years.
I don't know. That's not even really.
It's not quite there. It's getting there.
It's barely a franchise at this point.
Yeah, it's in its early stages of franchisehood. But the next movie on my list, my second favorite movie of the year, is one of the OGs of franchise IP films. And funny enough, this is actually not even an American film. It's a Japanese film called Godzilla Minus One.
Heyo, there it is.
Yes. You knew this was going to be on my list. I have talked about this nonstop.
I should say Godzilla Minus One was a really strong contender on my list. It just barely didn't make it on.
And that's fair. I think a lot of people, I've sold this movie to a lot of people this year, and a lot of people have walked out being like, that was really good. I liked it, but it's not like one of my favorite movies of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Godzilla Minus One is a goddamn masterpiece. I think that this movie is easily sitting in my top 15 right now of movies of all time.
It is pretty interesting how, like, this Godzilla movie made millions and millions of people cry.
Yeah,
you know?
Including me, multiple times.
Me too.
So this is a movie that did come out technically in 2023, but for me and most of its audience outside of Japan, we didn't really get to see this one until early January 2024.
Right, yeah.
Earliest. I did get to go see this in theaters, the Godzilla Minus One Minus Color, which was a really cool experience, seeing a black and white movie in theaters.
I can imagine, yeah.
I really would love to see another black and white movie in theaters at some point. I'm kind of looking out for one because it's such a visually stunning way to see a movie in theaters like that,
especially for something like Godzilla, right?
You know, it did win best visual effects at the Oscars this year, which absolutely deserved. Like,
oh, are you kidding? Yeah.
You know, the movie itself, I think it was made with like $15 million, and it's probably one of the best looking movies. It's certainly one of the best looking movies on my list for that price. Like,
I think the joke that was going around was like, if this is what $15 million looks like, then like why are these Hollywood movies taking like $200 million?
Right. But the other part of this movie is that it's a perfect story. Like it's a movie that takes place post World War Japan. Like it's immediately after World War II.
Japan has lost.
Japan has been crushed into the ground.
Yeah.
And this is a post-war recovery movie. It's about the death of imperialism, the death of the ideas that Japan had at this time, right? Like, What's so crazy to me about this movie is it's a movie that really cares more about the characters and the ideas. It goes back to the origins of Godzilla, and the origins of Godzilla are
that he's a prick.
Yeah, partially that, but also just like it's about the human element. And I think a lot of Godzilla movies over the last like X amount of years, like maybe even decades, have really more been about the monster itself.
Well, I think that's the big complaint with like those MonsterVerse movies is that the human characters are just kind of they're just kind of taking up space.
Yeah.
You know?
Whereas this movie, so Godzilla shows up very early in this movie, and then we don't see Godzilla again for almost an hour, I would say, into the film.
Something like that, yeah.
And I don't care at all.
These people are gripping.
They're so gripping in their stories about like trying to rebuild after post-war, after everything has been destroyed, everything's been taken away from these people. And then also on top of that, like our main character was a kamikaze pilot at the end of World War II who chose not to kamikaze.
Yeah.
And it's about him coming back and having this PTSD from the war, all this post-war guilt, and all of these people who are just rallying against him, right? Because of this old way of thinking of like the noblest thing that you could do is to give your life in a kamikaze.
Yeah.
And that was bred into the Japanese during World War II. And like,
no kidding.
Just to like have to experience that, I think that this movie, in my opinion, is miles ahead of Oppenheimer, and they're movies about very similar things. Like this movie is also like Godzilla is essentially a stand-in for the nuclear bombs that fell on Japan.
Yeah.
You know, when Godzilla shows up, he is truly menacing in this film.
Yeah, there's none of that like shit where he's like, you know, a protector of the human race somehow. Now he's just a dick.
And part of the reason why it's so good is because it spends so long with the characters and like getting you to understand and like care about these characters that the longer that Godzilla is absent from the movie, the more and more worried you get for each of the characters.
Yeah, there is something that happens maybe like right at the end of the second act where I was like watching it with you on your couch. I was like, my sphincter was clenching. I was just like, holy shit. Like,
yeah,
that was upsetting.
Yes. This movie is one of the most emotionally investing movies that you're gonna invest in this year?
I would say I did watch it again by myself at home, and I was still like,
Right.
yeah.
It's truly a masterpiece. Like, I cannot recommend this movie enough. Even if you don't think it's a masterpiece as much as I do, I think you're going to have a really good time with this one. And if you can see it in the Godzilla -1 minus color, I would recommend that too, because it adds something that's really cool to this one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my number 2 of this year. It's streaming on Netflix right now. Again, I cannot recommend Godzilla -1 enough.
Let's call that maybe my honorary top 6.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
my
fair.
honorary 6th spot.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about honorary mentions after this too, and I kind of thought that this one wouldn't quite make your list, but I figured that would be up there for you as well.
I enjoyed it more than Red vs. Blue Restoration, but my fanboy instincts overrode my quality instincts.
I'm actually looking forward to going checking some of the real original Godzilla movies out, because the themes and the ideas from this one I think are carried over from a few of the more famous ones. So really interested. Like, I'm not actually a big Godzilla person. I've only seen a couple of them before, like literally 2.
I saw Godzilla vs. Kong during the pandemic, and I was a little like, that's all right.
Yeah, I've heard actually the one that came out this year, like Godzilla X Kong, is actually people really had a lot of fun with. So
Okay.
it's just not the same thing, right? Like, those are monster movies, whereas this movie,
It is kind of interesting how you can kind of look at, so this is how the Americans interpret Godzilla, and this is how the Japanese interpret Godzilla.
well, yeah, yes and no, because the Japanese still have like monster movies that are focused on the monster more than
I guess
the
that's
characters
true,
too.
yeah.
So it's just this one kind of went back to its roots and like let's tell a deeper story here. And I kudos to them.
Let's
for
make
being able to sell
Godzilla a prick.
it. Yeah. So we're there. We're at number 1s.
Number 1,
Yeah.
numero uno.
Yeah, your
Numero Bruno.
your favorite first or second watch of this year.
The
new
gold
movies.
medal.
Yeah.
The piss.
What are you doing?
What? Oh,
What's your number 1?
what is my number? I thought you were asking me to explain that joke, but
No.
never mind. This wasn't that clever. My number 1 is a movie I saw in theaters in February. It took home quite a bit of Oscars, and well deserved, and that is Poor Things.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yep.
here's the thing. I had such a good time with this movie that I never want to watch it again. No, and you know what? That sounds like a diss, but it's high praise. It's like, nope, no. It's kind of like I said this about Toy Story 3, where it's like, I loved that movie so much that I never want to see it again.
I'm kind of with you on this.
Because if I see it again, I'm going to find something to complain about.
Yep.
I'm going to find a gripe, and I'd rather it just exists. It's almost like this hookup I had once, right? Where
Yeah.
it's just like, I have these perfect golden memories of that experience, and I
Right.
never want to tarnish them.
Yep.
So that's Poor Things. I laughed my fucking ass off in theaters.
It is so funny.
It is so uproariously funny. Mark Ruffalo and Emma Stone deserve all the praise in the world. Like,
Yes.
you know, I remember a mutual friend of ours got 10 minutes in, and he was just like, I didn't really like it. It felt kind of artsy. And I looked at him, and I'm just like, it's not for you, man.
Yeah.
But it is for me.
Yes.
It is.
Well, and I'll say in all fairness to him too, so there's a visual style that's used to convey early childhood in this movie.
Yeah.
And learning new things.
It starts weird.
Yeah, it's kind of using like a fish eye camera technique to show like this is a new experience for this character, and it gets used less and less throughout. Like, this is a movie that's wholly about like the human experience, right? And
Yeah.
and how society molds us into the people that we eventually
And
become.
It's so funny, you know?
Yeah.
Like, there's this great moment where
Bella.
Bella tries to she tries to grope her nanny, and the woman's like, she tried to touch my hairy business. There's also a scene where Mark Ruffalo's character is in a sanatorium, and then he farts and laughs at it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm just like, I don't it is hard to make me laugh. I've said that before. Like, it's hard to actually make me laugh, but I was hollering in theaters.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so fucking good.
Poor Things is on my long list. It's number 7 on my my favorite new movies of the year. I love this movie as well. Like, really, really love this movie.
Yeah.
Again, I'm kind of in the same boat with you. Like, I kind of want to go back to it. Again, I had a similar experience to you, but I didn't quite get to the point where this is such a masterpiece that I can never watch this to tarnish it.
And here's the thing. Don't ask me what it's about on a deeper level. I don't want to interpret it. I just had a great time.
Mhm.
And I just want it to be my great time.
Yeah.
That's it. Poor Things. Who's that director? What's his name again?
Yorgos Lanthimos.
Yeah, I also watched The Lobster.
I did as well this year.
Yeah, and I was kind of like, I really like this guy. Like, I want to see more of his stuff. I want to see what he does next.
Yeah, so do I. I'm really excited about it. He did release a movie this year as well called Kinds of Kindness that I haven't watched yet. It's actually with most of the same actors.
Oh,
And-
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
and it has less good reception to it. Although I heard that it was the movie that he was making more for general audiences, whereas Poor Things was supposed to be a little bit more artsy fartsy, I think.
That's funny that, like, so he had this passion project, Poor Things, and everyone loved it. And then he decided to just sell out, and everyone was like, fuck this.
Yeah.
More Poor Things. Actually, isn't that the highest praise, though? That people were just like, no, we like it when you're weird. Be more weird.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And again, I haven't seen Kinds of Kindness, but anyways.
Yeah, no, his visual style in this one, like Poor Things, really loved it. It was so funny. Mark Ruffalo, like, I kind of forgot how good of an actor he is.
Too. Like, he's very likable and charming and handsome as Dr. Banner. But, watching this movie, I was like, oh, yeah, like, you're
a serious actor.
You're good.
Yeah.
Like, you're not just good, you're great.
Him getting slapped in Poor Things is maybe one of my favorite clips of a movie.
Oh, my God.
I could watch that 100 times.
Oh, and just him as this, like,
pompous ass.
This pompous lady killer who slowly loses his mind is hysterical.
Yeah. Genuinely, like, I am fully supportive of this as your number one. This is a great movie.
It is.
Cannot recommend it
See,
enough.
guys, I'm not just a fan service shill. I have good taste. Yeah.
When it comes down to it, number one, you got there.
Poor Things.
Yeah, you got there for me. I'm glad that's on one of our lists because that was my Godzilla minus one. I had a really hard time cutting that.
You know what? It's true. This is apparently based on a book.
Yeah.
But the author died like 10 years ago or something.
Oh.
So he never got to see it, and I think that's sad. Although, and again, I haven't really looked into this too deeply. I think Yorgos took some pretty big liberties with it. I think I did read an interview with the director or the author of the original book where he said, like, he and Yorgos had met with each other like years ago when he was still alive. And he just said, yeah, no, I like what he's doing. So,
Yeah.
By the way, Yorgos, if you ever want to adapt any of my books, you can do whatever you want with them, buddy.
I heard this once on a podcast, a director say that in their opinion, the only types of books that should be adapted
Are bad ones,
are
right?
imperfect novels.
Okay.
Where you read it and you go, I really like the ideas from this. I can do it better.
Yeah.
In my opinion, we see a lot of times like something get adapted and it's like something that's a masterpiece that people love, that people have really, really deep connections with. And somebody goes, I can do it better. And everyone's like, why though?
Yeah.
Why are you doing that when you can make something that I love? And at that point, it's like, well, what's the point of even making it at that point? Because you already have what you love. I love a director like Yorgos. If that's actually what actually happened there, you know, that he took something that maybe wasn't quite perfect, that didn't quite jive for him, and he went, I can make this better.
That's kind of how I feel about the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones, where it's like,
Right.
the show for 4 seasons was actually better than the books.
Yeah.
And then it completely, it shat its own spine out.
Yeah. Yeah. Game of Thrones, man. Never going back to that one.
No. And fuck House of the
really-
Dragon, too.
Yeah, I'm upset about those ones still. But what I'm not upset about is my number one.
What's your number one, Blake?
My number one is a movie that I don't think I've just like leaned into the couch hard enough and then like spent the whole like movie like leaning in and out of the couch with excitement.
Wait. I think I know what it is. I think you forced me to watch it.
No.
Okay.
You and I have not seen this one together yet. I've only gotten to watch this one yet. This is one of the greatest epic films that I've seen in my entire life. This is already in my top 15 as well, like really high up there. It's a movie that like Hollywood does not make movies like this anymore.
Okay.
And it's
Oh, I know what it is. I know what it is.
It's an Indian movie that came out in 2022, and it's called RRR.
RRR.
3 R's.
3 R's.
It is one of the balls to the wall, craziest movies I have ever seen in my entire life.
I've heard nothing but high praise from it.
It's a movie from Tollywood, actually, not even Bollywood. It's like a different area of India.
Okay, I was going to say, I've never even heard of Tollywood.
Yeah, so it's kind of got a little bit of a different take on what a normal Bollywood movie, what you'd expect. Like, there's still elements of dancing in it, which are always, like, an absolute blast every time somebody starts dancing on the screen. It only happens like 2 or 3 times in this movie for like a 3.5 hour movie.
Is Bollywood notorious for dance numbers?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think that this is, again, like I said, this is a movie that Hollywood no longer knows how to make a movie this fun anymore.
Okay.
The biggest movie that I can actually liken this to is The Princess Bride. And
Really?
that it made me feel all of the feels.
So a 3-hour-long Princess Bride.
And just in the way that it made me feel, like there's something for everyone in this movie. There's so much that happens. It's funny, it's heartwarming, like it's cruel, it's like everything is to the absolute like extremist of extreme. Like, so what this movie at its core is about, it's loosely based on 2 Indian revolutionists during the 1930s while the British controlled India, the British Raj. And the British are portrayed as Nazis essentially in this movie.
Wah, wah.
And, you know, Jess and I were watching this and I kind of turned to her and I was like, this is wild seeing like a different perspective on like the British rule and colonization. And I was like, this feels like a Nazi movie. And I was like, but in all fairness, like,
Hey, come on now.
it starts with the British kidnapping a daughter who can sing extraordinarily well from this poor village in the middle of India. And so part of the movie is one of the village savior, essentially, on his way to trying to infiltrate the British to get their daughter back. And it's not even his daughter, just like the daughter of this village. And then on the flip side, there's like one of the most insane performances of a villain of like I've ever seen of like this other character. And they, 2 of these characters, like he's working for the British, and they just, when they meet, it's like, boom, crazy fireworks, and they become best friends.
Okay.
And so it's one character who is like starting a revolution and another character who is like working against them, and they just become like the bestest friends of all time. Like this movie is extreme extremes. Like
Okay,
when I say
that's what I've
best
heard,
friends,
yeah.
like there's like a montage of them being best friends after they meet.
Yeah, that's the only thing I've really heard about this movie is that it has big emotions. It
Big.
takes big swings.
So big. Like you can't not get swept up in everything. Like it's crazy how extreme this movie is in every sense of the word. Everything is at its extremist core, and it is such a fun time.
So in the same way that like my list is all about fan service, your list is about throwing subtlety out the window.
Yes, pretty
Okay.
much.
Interesting. That's a good way of putting a nice cap on everything.
Yeah, I think so. Like, so Jess actually said that this would have been her favorite as well, but it was a little too long for her. Like, it is over 3 hours. This movie is something that you have to be prepared to go into because, like I said, this movie is so big that if you aren't ready to sit down for a 3-hour movie, like, this movie will exhaust you because there's so much happens in this film.
Right. Okay.
But I am so excited to rewatch this movie at some point. Like this is special. This film is like captures something that I have not been able to capture in like my movie going experience for a very long time. And that's just like pure unadulterated joy with like pure fear, like, you know, this
Big
feels,
emotions.
this feels like Indiana Jones fighting the Nazis at parts. Like,
Okay.
there are
shit.
connections to that. Like, this movie is a love letter to cinema. Like, at its core, like, this movie actually pitches itself to the audience as this is the good, the bad, and the ugly India.
Huh. Okay. Well, shit, Blake. I think you sold me on it.
Yeah, like I said, like, this is a love letter from India to Hollywood and cinema, like Italian cinema, Hollywood cinema, like all of these different ideas come together and it's like there's its own unique spin on it. Genuinely an absolute masterpiece. The British colonel who's in the movie, who's like the main big bad of the film, is actually Ray Stevenson.
Who's Ray Stevenson again?
So he recently passed away. He was in one of the like recent Star Wars shows. Ray Stevenson, very tall guy, like he was in Ahsoka. You would know him if you've seen him before. Like
I'm googling him right now.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed that you don't already know who Ray Stevenson is, but
Oh, don't at me. Come on, man. This podcast was going so well.
yeah, I know, but he plays the villain in this movie so well. And actually, funny enough, my reference to Indiana Jones blew my mind later because as I was doing research about this movie, I realized that his wife, playing the evil British Empire's wife in this movie, is actually Elsa from The Last Crusade.
Shut up.
Yes. So like this movie knows exactly what it's going for, and it just wears its heart on its sleeve. I love everything about it. I cannot wait to see this movie again.
You know what? I hate to say this, but like I'm looking through Ray Stevenson's filmography right now. I don't know that I've ever seen the guy.
Wow,
Somehow I've missed Ray Stevenson.
that's disappointing. But once you get to see this movie, you will understand like why this movie is a masterpiece. And honestly, I think that everybody should watch this movie because it is actually an active masterpiece. So good.
Okay.
And it's on Netflix, so everybody can see it.
He said so 5 times, guys, so it's probably pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why it's my number one.
Okay, deal.
It genuinely moved me, and that's our top 5.
That is our top 5 of 2024.
Yeah.
I should say maybe a couple honorable mentions. So, like, okay, as far as honorable mentions go, I actually like Godzilla -1.
Yep.
I would have put The Substance as an honorable mention as well.
Mm-hmm.
Late Night with the Devil,
Yeah.
also pretty good. Like, it's more like interesting than good. It's like a solid 7 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, quite a few of the movies I enjoyed a lot this year were 7s out of 10s. So, you know what? We should all aspire to be 7s at the end of the day.
I think that sometimes a movie can be imperfect, but the parts that are good are like so good that they should still be recognized.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, people love imperfect things. That's what my therapist and I have been talking about recently.
But yeah, no.
Hi, Dorothy.
My honorable mentions, obviously, Poor Things is in there. My number 6 movie, and so Jess and I actually just...
Oh, shit, not to cut you off. What was that horror movie by David Cronenberg's son that we watched this year?
Infinity Pool.
Yeah, that would also an honorable mention.
So, obviously, Poor Things. My number 6, and this was a hard one not to include on my list as well, but it's a movie that, like, literally just came out, and I don't think a lot of people have got to see it yet. It's a movie called Anora.
Never heard of it.
So there's a lot of like indie movie buzz about this movie. Like this movie is a film that likely is going to actually win Best Picture. It could win some best performances as well. It is a movie by a guy named Sean Baker who's been making a lot of like independent films, and he's kind of been doing his own thing for a long time now, and he's finally getting recognized for his things. And I gotta say, like, Anora lives up to the hype. Like, this is a movie that I completely understand why it's gonna get all of the awards because the performances are great. It's a really, really funny movie. The first act is basically just straight sex for like 45 minutes. So if you're not comfortable with that,
all I needed to hear.
Not a movie for you. But honestly, like, this movie has like 3 very distinct parts to it, and they're all really compelling stuff. Like, I really enjoyed this one a lot, but I couldn't take any of my movies out of my top 5. But the other movies that I like this year a lot, The Holdovers, which kind of, you know, was a holdover from December 2023. Civil War was fantastic. I really like Civil War a lot. Furiosa was really good. I was surprised at how much I like Furiosa because Mad Max is in my top 3 favorite movies of all time, top 4 favorite movies of all time. So I was surprised at that one.
This has been such a weird year for movies. You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like this is the year everything except Deadpool and Wolverine bombed.
Yeah.
But actually, who's the young actress from The Substance?
Yeah, Margaret Qualley.
I saw an interview with her where she was on Fallon or something a while ago where she was making jokes about how every movie she was in this year bombed.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, no, weird year for movies. But like, you know what? Had a good time. Mm-hmm. And go see Sonic 3. It's really good. Honestly, it took a lot of... Keep in mind, I saw this movie last night. It took so much restraint not to put it in my number 1 spot.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, you never know, right? Maybe you'll simmer on it a little bit. Maybe it will end up being your number 1 of the year.
Yeah.
The lists are like, you know, they're fluid, right? Like, no list is ever going to stay a list.
Yeah. No, I know, right?
So the only thing I wanted to say before we kind of wrap up this episode is one of the key findings that I had, like you kind of talked about some of your key findings and like what you kind of took out of this. My top 3 favorite movies of the year are all foreign films or made by foreign filmmakers. Like The Substance is made by a foreign filmmaker. Like I believe Coraline is French. That to me says that like sometimes at times when, you know, these movies aren't quite to the same, or Coraline Fargate, sometimes when, you know, the movies are dark, like when there's nothing out there necessarily for you, look to the international cinema.
Look to the I mean, Hollywood is in such a weird state of flux right now. And I mean,
really is.
They've been in flux for like, I think almost 14 years now, but like the pandemic really put a lot of nails in a lot of coffins. So, you know what, though? It does kind of feel like we may be entering this new golden age of indie cinema.
Yeah.
Because it feels like there is a lot of really interesting shit out there. You just got to find it.
That's the biggest thing is like movies have to find their audience right now. And that's going to be the struggle, I think, for the next few years. But if the movie can find you and you can find the movies, and I think that like, you know, there are places on the internet like Letterboxd and other places like IMDb, maybe to a lesser degree these days. But there are places where you can kind of go and find these places and find these communities that have, like, movies that people really like and, you know, similar movies connected to them.
And if we may be so bold, maybe there's a life lesson in there, right? Like
Yeah.
when it comes to jobs and friends and partners and movies, it's out there. You just got to find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know where you were going with there, but that was a nice way to cap her off.
Yeah.
So you want to read out your top 5 before we wrap up?
Yeah, for sure. So my top 5 is Red vs. Blue Restoration, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Deadpool and Wolverine, Fight Me.
I will later.
Sonic 3, Fight Me.
I might not later about that one.
And Poor Things.
Great list. My top 5 is Hundreds of Beavers, Dune Part 2, The Substance, Godzilla -1, and RRR.
Arr.
So that's it. Top 5s of the last 5 years that we saw first or second viewing this year.
Yep. And what were your top 5? Sound off in the comments. Like, please, for the love of God, leave a comment.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. Like, genuinely would like to hear of some movies that people liked, so I can check them out. Because there's a few movies that I haven't even got a chance to get to yet this year that I really am looking forward to. So, yeah, let's hear, like, maybe even some movies that we talked about that you haven't got to see yet.
Oh, shit. You know what? I forgot. One honorable mention, Longlegs. It doesn't live up to the hype, but it's worth it for Nicolas Cage's performance.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah.
That's it. I said something nice about Longlegs.
That's one of the movies that is on my list that I haven't got to see yet. I don't think it would have made my top 5 either, but I am looking forward to watching it, despite all of the maybe mixed reception it ultimately got.
Yeah. Hype is a funny thing.
Hype is a funny thing. All right. Well, we will see you next week for our top 5 old movies of the year.
Woo!
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Me too.
All right. See you next time.
Tell your dad.